Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sabres of Infinity. So, in the last episode, we pulled off a daring plan and we managed to turn around and secure ourselves one of the lords of Antari. So, yeah, we managed to actually use our skills and our wits in order to secure a very nice victory. But now we're finna meet up with the Duke of Wolfram's main force, and we're gonna see what's up with him and finally meet this legendary figure as we have it now. But yeah, and also we won the Meritus Service Order cross for the event in the last battle. I actually got an achievement for it when I was going on to the next page. But yeah, let's go ahead and pick up on the next part. So, and nothing has changed as far as the state of the war. Nothing has changed as with the events or anything like that. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and continue on with chapter 10, wherein the cavalry officer is given some knowledge of the momentous events soon to pass. The summer sun shines bright through the windows of the Duke of Canaris' office, wreathing your regimental commander's burly form in an outline of flaxen light as he considers the three of you standing at attention before him. I've read your reports, gentlemen, and I saw fit to send them forward to my superiors. A close but hard-fought victory, I believe, was how you put it, Captain Elson. The captain nods in agreement. Yes, sir. A victory won by Lieutenant Draken's brilliant deception, sir. The Duke nods, a beatific smile on his face, looking very much like a proud father. Quite so, Captain. In fact, the Duke of Wolfram seems to agree with you. Though there have been a few minor points of contention between my office and theirs, they have seen fit to award all three of you with the Meritus Service Order. Congratulations. You try thoroughly to hide your disappointment. The Meritus Service Order is not a particularly exalted honor and barely ranked above the campaign ribbon that every single soldier of the King's army in Antar will receive at the end of the war. You had expected higher honors for your victory, especially considering the coveted and prestigious decorations you had won at the war's beginning. Regardless of how hard you tried to suppress your expression of unpleasant surprise, it was not hard enough. The Duke seemed to pick up on it immediately. We've been at war for nearly 6 years now, gentlemen. You may no longer expect high command to hand out decorations freely. Suffice it to say, this stalemate has grown tiresome to our superiors. If you want a prestigious medal pinned to your chest, then we must have us a prestigious victory. That Antari lord you captured shall fetch a sizable sum. I shall make the necessary arrangements with young Corroborate's army. If you thirst for something shiny and metal to pin to your breast, you may make a sash from the ransom gold if you wish. You nod. There is very little else you can do. Lieutenants do not usually win arguments with their regimental colonels. Canaris looks at each of the three of you in turn, making sure that he has your undivided attention. Gentlemen, as you are likely well aware, the Duke of Wolfram is gathering his army here because he believes there is a chance for us to swing the war decisively in our favor. I must admit that nothing would quite be more welcome. This whole Antari adventure is not popular amongst the commons back home. Never mind that we were the ones attacked. I apologize. The king has appealed to the courts to raise a tax on wages, a dreadfully unpopular measure, obviously. Even so, if this war continues, by this time next year, Tierra will be in debt for the first time in its history. The king, the courts, and the commons will want a swift end to this war, and Wolfram plans to give it to them. The Duke leans forward, his voice lower, almost conspiratorial, as if he were sharing a secret with the three of you. But to do that, he shall need a victory, a great victory. He needs officers of skill and intellect and command. That is what I shall expect you to be. I shall trust all three of you not to disappoint me. There is silence for a moment, broken only by the quiet scratching of quill on parchment coming from the desk of the Duke's aides behind you. Canaris leans back, satisfied that he has gotten his message across. Now, gentlemen, I assume I shall see you at the reception tonight. Captain Elson replies for you. Of course, sir. Then you are dismissed. Good day. The streets of Noringia have become almost unrecognizable since you returned from the north less than a week ago. Over the space of 5 days, a dozen regiments recruited from all over the unified kingdom and formerly stationed all over the southern Antar have converged upon the town. The formerly half-empty streets are now awash with uniforms of every color, from the green-gray of your own regiment to the silver of the Wolf's Head cuirassiers to the burnt orange of the Lion Infantry. In addition, having apparently sensed the likelihood of a climactic campaigning season, observers from half a dozen nations share the streets with Antari stragglers and Tycharian soldiers. The harbor is filled with ships from all over the northern kingdoms, and a sleek black-hulled schooner from Takaran as well. Elson's eyes seem to dart everywhere as you walk down the crowded main thoroughfare with your fellow officers of the 3rd Squadron. Occasionally, he will point out a particularly distinctive uniform or emblem, some regiment or house guard or other. Kazarosta remains silent, though his eyes seem to follow your captain's. Eventually, the other lieutenants disappear into the crowd, leaving only the two of you. Saints above, Elson exclaims as the two of you step into the cool shade of your lodgings. Tonight's reception shall be like a moving shrine window, save with the dress uniforms instead of colored glass. Our green-gray shall seem as dull as stone compared to some of those lot. Let's see what choices we have. I reassure Elson that our recent victory will make our uniforms unrecognizable enough. Sure, I'll do that. Yeah. Okay, I could choose all these options. Elson smiles but shakes his head. I see what you're trying to do, Draken, and I thank you for it, but we shall not be the only officers in the room fresh from a victory. There's been skirmishing all along the front over the past few months, and I have no doubt there shall be toasts made to some victorious young officers tonight, but they shall be men of richer families and more prestigious regiments, not us. Nonsense, sir. You say before you even realize you've said it. We may not be of powerful families, but there is no house more powerful than that of the Duke of Canaris, save that of the king himself. Would he not want to show us off to good effect? I would think so. The captain stops to consider your words for a moment before flashing you a bright smile. Damn me, I think you've the right of it, dear fellow, he says, patting you happily on the shoulder. Sure, let's ask Elskin about the reception. The captain seems shocked that you have forgotten when you ask him about the evening's reception. Pray tell me that you have not forgotten already. Damn me if we were not given the invitations to them just yesterday at low tea. When it becomes evident to the other officers that you have indeed misremembered, he gives a rather melodramatic sigh before reminding you. If you'd care to recall, the Duke of Wolfram has organized a reception for this evening. He's inviting every single officer in Thuringia, the foreign observers too, though one wonders how he plans to fit them all into one building, let alone one hall. In short, it is the most important formal event either of us shall ever likely be invited to, not to mention the first one I've seen in 6 years. Elson smirks boyishly. Do you remember now, dear fellow? Asked Elson about the Duke of Wolfram. The captain explains for you. The Duke of Wolfram is the commanding officer of the king's forces here in Antar, of course. He also is the most senior member of the king's army and privy council. Elson pauses to recall further, as if being tested by a schoolmaster. He's a career soldier, made his name in the Royal Marines during King Alaric's War, if I recall correctly. He's one of the old school of officers, but he's a pretty powerful caster and has been a general longer than either of us have been alive. I'd like to think that puts us in good hands, regardless of any conservatism on his part. I excuse myself and retire to my room to prepare for the reception. You make your excuses and return to your room to make yourself presentable enough for the evening's reception. The long and painstaking process of preparing yourself for a formal event has become an unfamiliar one after so many years of soldiering on the frontier and shuffling down the ramshackle streets of formerly empty Thuringia. However, you are still the son of a noble house and remember your lessons on the subject well enough. You change into your finest underclothes and dab dashes of scent in the places where you are most likely to sweat. This done, you begin the ordeal of putting on your uniform. For an occasion of this magnitude, not even your dress uniform will be ornate enough. Instead, you must attend the Duke of Wolfram's reception in what is known as court dress, which adds more belts, more ornamentation, and more gold braid to your dress tunic. A half jacket, half cape confection called a dolman is tied over your left shoulder. Its even more uselessly ornamental cousin, the palisse, a bastard child of fur cloak and jacket, is draped over it. Okay. As you begin the final process of looking over your sword and the grooming of your hair, you sense a bane signature of immense power approaching you from far away. It is certainly even more overwhelming than the presence of a knight of the Order's militant, a rather unsettling thought. A moment later, you hear the sound of hobnailed boots beating against the cobbles in perfect order. It is only then that you realize that the bubbling noise of the streets below seems to have faded away. The crunching beat grows louder, and with it the source of the Bane sign draws nearer. The sound of marching grows louder and louder, until suddenly it stops, as does the Bane sign right below your window. Take a look. You peer out the window, and you behold a sight which will remain with you until the end of your days. Standing before you are two perfect ranks of the most spectacularly outfitted and drilled soldiers you have ever seen. Even from a distance, you can see that not a single hobnailed jackboot is out of line. Not a single fold of their black and silver uniforms looks any less than perfectly placed. The steel of their breastplates and helmets shine mirror-like in the afternoon sun. The barrels of their muskets and the scabbards of their long, curved swords blaze with the chain power of Bane runes. You recognize them immediately from stories and legends and low whispers in the officers' club. They are the soldiers of the Reichsflabergart, the Takaran Imperial Guard, and the finest line infantry in the world. And I'm pretty sure I butchered that word. At their head stands a muscular figure with straight, chin-length platinum blonde hair and the bearing of an officer. The leader of the Tycharian soldiers shouts a command in a rich, throaty voice. It is only then that you realize that the Tycharian officer is a woman. It is common knowledge that their racial ability to use the Bane without restriction allows Tycharian society to draw no distinction of sex. However, seeing the principle in action is an entirely different matter. Now that you look closer, you realize it is likely that a good number of the other soldiers in the formation might be of the fairer sex. Heady stuff, isn't it? Oof. So yeah, we're starting to see the Takaran military, which is quite something from what I've understood. I've read a little bit. There's actually some lore on Paul Wang's website, cataphract.com, if I'm not mistaken. But he actually goes into detail about the different reports. It's written in the manner of reports from Tycharian intelligence and stuff like that. So it's actually pretty interesting. And again, that's also something where if you want me to kind of cover that later on, I can cover it before I do the Lords of Infinity beta. I think I actually will play it on the channel, but I'll make sure I get permission before I do that. So I need to check with Paul before that happens. But yeah, like there's different reports that they have that deal with things like the history of certain characters that you will meet later on, the history of the nation, the the Unified Kingdoms and stuff like that. So, and of course the wars and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of lore that has been written about the Infinite Sea or whatnot. So yeah, I can definitely go into that if that's something that people want to see. But again, you have to let me know these things. So, of course, the choices here are a frightening notion, actually. If the Tycharians are unprincipled enough to expose their women to battle, who knows what they might be capable of. I'm sure it's all fine and good for the Tycharians, but elven women have so many advantages with their human counterparts simply do not possess. The Takaran have allowed their women to fight in their wars, and they are one of the most powerful nations in the world. Should we not follow their example? That's a reasonable thing to turn around and say. If only we allowed our women to fight alongside us. Not only would it allow us to replace lost soldiers faster, but it would allow Tierra to field a larger army. And I agree with that. So, of course, if the king only allowed women to join the army or the freedom to take up the essential trades like shipmaking and gunsmithing, which keep otherwise healthy men from overseas service, they could double the number of fighting soldiers on the field in Antar overnight. It is a pity most cannot bring themselves to think as you do. And it's also kind of strange too when you think about it, because like this is in the time where there's a lot of musket fighting and stuff like that. There's still sabers being used, of course, as the name of the game, and of course, entails or whatnot. But you would think that the idea of women fighting, I guess, would be not so much of a foreign concept, considering that you're using muskets. So it's not like the strength requirement is such a big deal. Being a strong, powerful swordsman, like in Game of Thrones, isn't such a necessity when you have a gun. So, but of course, as things are during the times and stuff like that, women were supposed to do certain things and men were supposed to do certain things. And I'm sure that's built into the religions and everything else in between. So, okay. On the streets below, the Takaran soldiers continue. Grodin den Nabari Kagiram Dane, the officer bellows. Immediately, the Takaran formation tightens around its flag, their boots echoing off the cobbles in perfect unison, the result of what could only be long decades of drilling. A second figure appears alongside the officer, another woman, taller and longer of hair, but slimmer. You hear the two converse for a moment, too quietly for you to hear. Then the officer shouts again, In Bainfel Vakumim. The words mean nothing to you, but the Takaran soldiers respond to them instantly. They ground their muskets, slamming the end of the brass-plated wooden butts into the ground in a perfect, steady beat. Takara on Tazunkai, they chant. Takara on Tazunkai. Takara on Tazunkai. At the third repetition, the Takarans once again shoulder their arms. The officer takes her position in the center of the first rank. The other Takaran, obviously not a soldier, takes her place in front of her. You see her give another order to the officer, obviously her subordinate. Irisum Lindexri Ket Windane, the officer shouts. At that, the soldiers begin marching once again, with all the ominous precision of a stalking wolverine. Before long, the Takaran soldiers are gone, and you find yourself looking out your window, seeing nothing but the empty space where they had once stood. It kind of reminds me, if you ever see the Chinese military, whenever they have the victory celebrations or whatnot, of course, for the revolution and stuff like that, the precision, my God, like the precision is ridiculous and stuff like that. And also you'll see that too with other members of history that I won't mention, of course. It's one obvious one that I can think of. But yeah, you can just kind of get that kind of idea of what they're probably marching like. I'm sorry, but I do like this stuff like that. When you see the soldiers marching in perfect unison and stuff like that, it is really cool. Anywho, the sun is low in the sky as you finish your preparations. As you make your way across the darkening town, you notice that while officers head for the reception in a steady stream, the common soldiers are pulling double duty as sentries and torchbearers. After all, it would not do for a foreign delegate or staff officer to be lost or worse on such an important evening. The reception is being housed in the cavernous town hall, turned into Wolfram staff headquarters in recent days. As you reach the courtyard, you find the windows ablaze with light and the sound of soft string music wafting towards you. A dozen orange-jacketed infantrymen keep guard over the entrance with fixed bayonets. The honor guards of a dozen foreign delegations loiter outside, awaiting their master's return. The guards allow you to pass without pause or comment. Perhaps the uniform of the Royal Dragoons has become more familiar in recent days, or maybe the sentries simply took you for a foreign attaché and let you in on the basis of your current state of overdress. Regardless, you soon find your way to the entrance of the main hall. A line is formed before the doors, with each new arrival waiting patiently to be announced by the herald. Quickly enough, you queue up behind an ensign of one of the foot regiments and a major of the Kantari Highlanders. Draken, by the saints, sir, so it is. The familiar voice turns you around on your heel, and you find yourself face to face with a tall, handsome Wolframite in his early 30s, wearing the burnt orange dress coat of a grenadier officer. Sir Enrique Hunter, Lieutenant Colonel Hunter now, by the insignia on his shoulders and collar, greets you with a warm handshake. Your former commanding officer does not seem to have changed at all, save for a few fresh creases along his face and the very light line of a scar across his temple. Draken, or rather Lieutenant Draken, I've been following your new command with great interest. Your gallant heroics have quite the following. I hear Wolfram himself wants you on his staff. Before you can respond, you hear the sound of a throat politely clearing behind your back. It is the herald, trying to remind you as decorously as possible that you are now at the head of the queue and must be announced. There is, of course, the question of how it should be done. Heroes of the moment often try to make as big a splash as possible so that it becomes difficult to forget them. More questionable figures of society would likely prefer to keep their profile low, should they wish to avoid accusations or presumptions. I want everything. Name, rank, regiment titles, decorations, everything. I want to make as big an impression as possible. Family name, all that stuff. So yeah. Lord Darren de All Dracon of House Dracon, Cross of St. Jerome, Griffin of Rindoware, Meritus Service Order, and Lieutenant of the Royal Dragoon Regiment. You step onwards unto the main hall, hoping that you have not made an ass of yourself for such a presumptuous entrance. To your pleasant surprise, you find rather the opposite, in fact. The murmurs that follow you are admirational in tone. Half the room turns to cast their approval upon your entrance. There's even a light smattering of polite applause. From this company, you could expect no higher compliment. The main hall is a garden of bright uniforms glittering under the bright candlelight. Decorations shine and sparkle on the tunics of soldiers from what seem like every regiment in the king's army, and a few from kingdoms overseas as well. Even at a glance, you recognize the colors of the Holy Guard of Merston, the tunic of the one of the 12 companies of Calendria, and an over-decorated piece of frippery which could only belong to an officer of the Sea Watch of Azula. Azula. However, before you and Hunter even take a dozen steps, you are accosted by two familiar faces. Draken, come to the festivities at last then, dear fellow. Captain Elson is his usual friendly self. Beside him is Lord Captain Hartigan, now Lord Major Hartigan, judging by the insignia on his coat. I'm sure I'll introduce Hunter to Elson. Sirs, may I introduce Lord Lieutenant Colonel Enrique de All Hunter of the Grenadier Guards, Colonel Lord Captain Davis Dahl Elson, my commanding officer, and Hunter steps forward to greet Major Hartigan, a broad smile on his face. Well, it's been an age, has it not, Lord Hartigan? Indeed so, Lord Wolfswood, the infantryman replies using your former commander's court title. Sir Enrique and his brother squired from my father before the war. And how is Philippe doing? Hunter shakes his head softly. Dead, I'm afraid. 2 years ago, whilst attempting to take an Antari position, a field piece caught him in the chest. I was told it was very quick. Very quick indeed, but far from clean. A bane-hardened breastplate might turn a bayonet or shake off a musket ball, but a 2-kilogram ball of iron would make a mess of an armored knight of the red as easily as it would an unprotected infantryman. Hartigan's expression is a sad one. I'm quite sorry. He says the decorum required of him in the formal setting preventing him from saying or doing more. Don't be, Hunter replies. He died in the saddle with his sword in his hand and his front toward the enemy. Very few men are lucky enough to be picked by the saints in such a manner. The genteel commiseration of your two seniors fades out as you take another look at the room around you. The biggest knot of conversation is, of course, centered around the Duke of Wolfram himself, a tall, gaunt figure in a powdered wig 30 years out of date, and the richly braided uniform of his house guard regiment, the Wolf's Head Cuirassiers. With him stand his senior staff and subordinates, the Earl of Castermaine. Castermaine? Like Casterly Rock? What was the name of the Castermeres? Yeah, it was the Castermeres in Game of Thrones. The Duke of Havenport, the Baron of Turlbridge, powerful men of old and distinguished families all. Not far away, there's another focus of attention. The two stern-looking women in black and silver Takaran uniforms, long curved broadswords belted into their hips. Though many seem keen to talk to the emissaries from the finest land army in the world at first, their interaction seems to be no more than short, sharp exchanges which end as abruptly as a burst of musket fire. Hunter and Hardigan are, of course, still chatting away, though seemingly about more happy matters. Elson stands rather out of place beside them. Lastly, you spy a slim figure in green-gray standing in the shadowed corner of the great hall, Casarosta. The others in the room seem to avoid him on purpose, though his unwelcoming stance and expression certainly do not help matters. So, yeah. Who are we going to talk to now? I kind of do want to talk to the Tycharian envoys first, but I feel like I should take this opportunity to probably go and talk to the Duke of Wolfram, because I don't know if I'm going to actually get a free moment to talk to him later. So let's see what the Duke of Wolfram is actually up to. You head for the center of the hall where the Duke of Wolfram and his senior subordinates hold court amidst a massive knot of hangers-on, junior officers like yourselves, and foreign delegates looking for an insight into the mind which has led the king's army for so many years. Needless to say, you doubt you will be able to get any kind of word in. While you are certainly allowed to voice your own opinion, it would have to be in private afterwards. The thought of a mere lieutenant speaking on matters of war and state with a lieutenant general and his attendant generals of brigade is a notion verging on the lunatic. You are thankfully able to push your way to the front of the crowd where you can see the genteel course of your army's command without obstruction. In fact, you are lucky enough to find the Duke of Wolfram in the midst of a conversation with one of his regimental commanders. Your regimental commander, in fact. The Duke of Canaris seems even broader and more muscular next to the slim figure of the Duke of Wolfram. However, his words are quiet and measured, not the basso rumble you are used to. You have to strain to hear him speak. 4th Squadron is close enough to strength to take the field. The 6th is short maybe 20 or 30 troops. Not too bad. 3rd Squadron lost its captain not long ago, but his replacement seems an able enough sort. They have few losses besides, and currently stand as the closest to strength. 1st, 2nd, and 5th Squadrons are still back in Tierra for replenishment, of course. After last winter's skirmish, there were barely 100 men fit for duty on the out of the entire lot. Wolfram does not seem overly pleased with Canaris' words. His thin, angular face grows more pinched in frustration. Damnation, he growls. We've lost more men than I would have liked over the past few months. Far more. Worse than that, the fools at Grenadier Square seem to be entirely incapable of securing me replacements. They tell me that there are not enough men to be had. The general gives a short, barking laugh. Do you believe that, my dear Canaris? We've a kingdom of 6 million, of whom we might have 500,000 or 600,000 fit for service. Yet they cannot find me the men to maintain an army 1/20 of that size. Another voice joins the conversation. A low tenor glazed lightly with a Kintari accent. Sir, fuming about it will do little good. Grenadier Square will not bend their procedure without the king's orders. And we've not the time to ask him for it, not as things are. The Duke of Wolfram grits his teeth. Saints damn them all. You're right, my dear Havenport, but that does not change the fact that I've barely 18,000 men together. They say Corroborate is fielding twice as many. It seems that we must now rely on the clumsiness of the enemy or the spirit of our common soldiers for our victory. That does not please me, not at all. The Kintari, a man whom you now recognize as the Duke of Havenport, Wolfram's second in command, interjects quietly. Perhaps we should best discuss these affairs in more secure settings, sir. Besides, you've an address to prepare. Wolfram nods, a bitter smile on his face. I suppose I must. Very well, let's have this crowd gone. You take your leave with the others and head elsewhere, Wolfram's words weighing heavily in your mind. A climactic battle seems not only imminent, but a challenge so daunting that even the illustrious Duke of Wolfram is at his wit's end. A rather troubling thought, to be sure. You decide I will speak to the Takarian envoys. I think I shall speak with the Takarans, you say. Elson nods. Very well, I'll go with you. The Takarans seem neither happy or annoyed to see you approach them, Elson in tow. You begin to introduce yourself. I am one of the envoys, a tall strawberry blonde in the very first days of middle age cuts you off. Lieutenant Dracon and Captain Elson of the Royal Dragoons. Yes, we know who you are. We know all about you, she says tersely, in a hard voice made sharper by her guttural accent. I have the pleasure to be Attendant Ulrich Eckhart's? She gestures to the broader, lighter-haired woman beside her. Captain Helena Vestalis, my military attaché. There's an awkward pause for a moment as you and Elson try to respond. After all, to speak so bluntly and out of turn in such a setting is beyond rude. Perhaps the Takarans are more blunt people. And again, it is more likely that they simply do not give much thought to the customs of those they see as their inferiors. The older woman, Intendant Eckhart's, picks a glass of wine from a passing tray without turning to look at it. She looks at it with an annoyed expression for a moment before you feel the lightest whisper of a touch brush the inside of your mind. A second later, you see the delicate wine glass in the Takaran's hand fog up, as if suddenly chilled. It is most suitable and casual use of the bane you have ever witnessed. Well, it is the most subtle and casual use of the bane you've ever witnessed. You had questions, did you not? She says, her tone impatient. Ask them. Okay, now I'm kind of scared. I asked the attendant how she knows who I am. The attendant shakes her head. Your government gave us files on the list of Tycharian officers in your army and their standing orders before departing Varsovia. Standard procedure, she replies, as if nothing could have been simpler. You hide your puzzlement as best you can. As far as you know, your government would never reveal such information to the representatives of a foreign power, especially one possessing relatively cordial relations with Antar. Perhaps Eckhart is hiding something. Do you have any more substantive questions to ask? Ask the intendant about what she's doing in Antar, perhaps? Wait. If I ask, am I going to run out of questions? The intendant chews her lip in annoyance. Clearly, she has been asked the question 100 times before. I'm here on the orders of His Imperial Majesty, Breskin Van Paulus, Aldkizern Vam Dieren Takara. My sole instruction were to observe your army and report my recommendations to the Imperial government. My words and the words of my counterpart embedded in Prince Korobirit's army will determine our policy in this conflict, or rather, if we are to intervene. Will you? Elson asked nervously. Intervene, I mean. Your captain has very good reason to be anxious. The Takaran Empire fields one of the finest land armies in the world, and the largest navy besides. Takaran intervention in favor of one side or another would less tip the balance of power than upend it entirely. Eckhart gives a harsh bark of a laugh, answering anxiety with dismissal. This long stalemate suits us perfectly. If Tierra and the League are at each other's throats, they are not encroaching on our monopolies or our spheres of interest. Regardless of who wins, both sides will be exhausted. The Antari will be humbled, and Tierra, well, I doubt there will be enough of Tierra left to give us much trouble for at least a century. There's a shocked silence for a moment as you process the sheer insignificance which the Takarans attribute to the war around you. The thought is sobering, frightening, and more than a little bit infuriating. The Takaran sips her wine as you do, watching you and Elson's shocked expressions with something quite akin to pleasure. Anything else you wish to ask of me? Jesus Christ. So I'm guessing the Takarans are kind of like the Aldmari Dominion to a certain degree. Jesus, they kind of rough. Kind of rough. I kind of wonder if I kind of know. I mean, I do know of the story, of course, of the Infinite Sea and how things are going to kind of play out. Of course, I know what happens in Lords of, well, not so much know what happens, but I know how these things will kind of go. But I know what's going to happen in Guns of Infinity to a certain degree and Lords of Infinity. I wonder if in the end game we're going to have to fight Takara or Takara. So I mean, that's gonna be interesting because they are really powerful. And I mean, I would think that they're not like British Empire powerful against the United States type powerful. I would think like they're ridiculously powerful. So I mean, it would be interesting to see how Paul is gonna, write this going forward because I mean, that's a very daunting task against a professional military who's, has far more troops than you, not as war weary as you, technologically probably technologically more advanced than you, and also has magic. So that's going to be a pain if you have to fight them. But, we'll see how things go. So I was told in the comments in the first video, actually, that I said before that this was going to be a trilogy. It's actually not. There's actually 5 books planned right now and some spin-off books planned. I say books, of course, because choice of games are kind of like books. But yeah, there are actually 5 games planned. So right now you have Sabres of Infinity, Guns of Infinity, Lords of Infinity. I don't know what the other 2 are named, but and then of course some spin-offs that are supposed to be tied around, I think, either Takara or someone else. I'm not sure if I have that right. So that's going to be very interesting to see, and I would definitely love to play that. So anywho, I will ask the intendant about Takara. The intendant narrows her eyes at your question. What is Takara like? The same as it has always been. Varsovia is a pit of enraged vultures. The Reichsgraf von Holtz, slut of a son, is stirring up trouble in the Senate again, and the Minister of the Fleet will be committing public ritual suicide within the month if the allegations of graft and corruption are true. Eckhart's tone is disdainful to the extreme. Captain Vistalas opens her mouth as if to object, but the intendant cuts her off with a sharp motion of her fingers. Yet I would still give a leg and both my ears to be there. She looks at those around her, you included, with an expression of pure contempt. And not here. Okay, so she really doesn't like Tierra. This is not going well so far. Ask the intendant for her opinion on the state of the Tycharian army. Oh, this is going to be lovely. A vicious ghost of a smile flashes across the intendant's lips as you ask her opinion on the royal army. Where do I start? From what I have seen of your army, your musketry is sloppy and your tactics are primitive. I can say without a trace of irony that I have seen school children with better drill. It is the sheer ineptitude of the Antari forces which keeps you alive and fighting. Nothing more, nothing less. She's actually not that wrong about that. So, I mean, when you think about it, we've gotten into a couple of encounters so far, and it's been purely because either they're tired and peasants, of course, or because it's just they're not centralized. They're not a centralized force. But my God, if we had to deal with a centralized force, that would probably be bad. Elson replies before you do. Surely the talents of our senior officers and statesmen must have something to do with our successes in the field. Eckhart sneers at your squadron commander's words. I was a miskin of 16 when your Edwin de Rindoware proclaimed your petty little kingdom from the heap of stones which you call the Northern Keep. Since then, I have met many of your countrymen. Out of those, I have met one worthy of my respect, a diplomat and a man of far greater family than you. Jesus, come. You feel your curiosity getting the better of you. Who might that be? The intendant dismisses your question with a flick of her finger. It doesn't matter. He's long dead and his line extinct. The Takaran eyes seem to focus elsewhere for a moment towards one of the far darkened corners of the hall. Or rather, it will be soon enough. Eckhart takes another sip of wine, effectively declaring the topic closed. Was there anything else? Good Lord, no. But also interesting, because who is this person that even the Takaran was just like, okay, this is really a special person. Interesting. Also, maybe I'm misunderstanding that. Does that mean that, of course, as elves, which is traditional in most games or most, forms of media that I've dealt with, do the Takarans live for a very long time? Because that's what I'm getting here. I'm getting that she's very, very old. I know in, I think it was in Dragon Age, the elves were immortal until the quickening, and then of course they started aging like humans or whatever. So I don't think any of them actually they don't. I think they might live slightly longer, but not that much longer. So I'm curious now. I take my leave. You make your excuses. Perhaps you will find a less abrasive group of people to speak with. Eckhart doesn't seem to care either way. Very well. Come, Vistalas, let us see if we cannot find a few less ignorant individuals. Oof. The more junior of the two Takarans leans in as the intendant turns to leave. She's really not that bad of a sort once you get to know her, she says quietly and apologetically. Now, Vistalas, the intendant's tone is clearly impatient. Not that bad. Elson sneers quietly to you as two Takarans make their retreat. No, dear fellow, I reckon she's worse. You know what? I kind of would be interested if that's a romance option later on and stuff like that, just to see. Again, I'm all about stepping on people, but just to see how that would turn out. You know what? I'm gonna say Castamere at some point. It's gonna happen. Before you can take another look around, you hear the tapping of a spoon against a glass. Faint at first, but as the bubbling sound of a dozen conversations recedes, the ringing sound becomes louder and louder. Within moments, the entire hall is silent save for the sound of a single spoon clattering against a single glass. Those in the center of the chamber move aside to reveal the source of the noise, the Earl of Castamere, and beside him, the commander of all Tycharian forces in the Antar, the Duke of Wolfram. Thank you, Castamere, that will do. His imperious voice brings the table to silence. The old general sweeps his eyes over the room as a hush falls over the assembled delegates and officers. Yes, delegates of foreign governments, brother officers, he finally begins. We have certainly come a long way, have we not? Not 6 years ago, we were barely an army. A few thousand ragged, unseasoned volunteers in a strange land without fortification, without shelter, and with only the mad hope of a young king to drive us to victory. Now we are firmly entrenched in a land which once thought it could crush us effortlessly, and our king's hopes, well, they do seem a bit more sensible now, do they not? A smattering of laughter, most of it nervous, comes from the crowd. Many did think the king mad when he put into train his Antari adventure. By the look of vindicated pride on the old general's face, you can tell that Wolfram was not one of them. 'Tis a long, difficult road that we have marched down all these years, but saints be willing, we have seen the end not so far ahead of us. Soon now, we shall meet the Antari in battle, and we shall break their army in the open field. We shall bring them to the negotiating table, and there shall be no more complaints of dishonorable tactics or insubstantial setbacks on their end. We will have them beaten. Before the eyes of the saints and all men, we shall, in the eyes of the world, have claimed victory. Thankfully, nobody is uncouth enough to cheer at Wolfram's words, though the expected wave of polite applause is, perhaps, a bit louder than usual. However, you cannot help but ask yourself how much of Wolfram's speech is genuine and how much of it is mere rhetoric to fire up the weary soldiers in his hall for a few months longer. To bring that victory, we must have each man do his utmost to secure it. Let there be no talk of retreats or of withdrawals, of stalemates, or cutting our losses. His Majesty has always expected his servants to do their duty. In the past few years, I've been prideful of the fact that we have not disappointed him. Let us not falter now. Let our duty be victory, and let us see it through. Saints guard the king, the whole room seems to reply, every glass raised in salute, including yours. Saints guard the king. Wolfram's words ring in your ears for the entire evening, throughout the banquet and the toast that follow. They continue to resonate even as you return to your quarters, your mind intoxicated with the specter of a final victory and a good deal of very fine wine. You sleep that night, dreaming of the end of the war, a vision with a tint of nightmare, returning home merely to fight another struggle against some other foreign land. In the end, it is a knock on your door which shakes you free of your thoughts on the war's impending end. You dress quickly in the dim early morning light and open the door to find Staff Sergeant Lanzaro with a new set of orders. to investigate a forward listening post to the north, which had failed to report in. You ready yourself and call out your men in a sort of fatigued state. As soon as your men are in formation and riding up the old Imperial Highway, your thoughts return to that of an end to the conflict which has shaped so much of your life. It is as if you were only half awake, or drugged, or in love. Whenever your mind is not pressed by some urgent matter of patrol, you think only of the peace which is soon to come. You're still thinking it when you feel the ground begin to tremble and your mind begins pulling and straining upon itself in a way which you've never felt since your last visit to Atoria so long ago. There's almost no need to confirm your suspicion, but you do it anyways. You ride forward, field telescope in hand, and see with your own eyes the advancing vanguard of Prince Corbirit's Antari army. So, we're heading towards the end of Sabres of Infinity, and I think in the next video I will try and just make it one long video, if it is indeed long. I don't think it will be that long, but yeah, I'll just conclude everything in the next video, and then we shall go ahead and end it there, and then we'll move on to Guns of Infinity. And if there's enough, if the reception is good for it, we'll also do Lords of Infinity, the demo, and we'll go as far as we can in that. Again, I will contact the developer and see if it's okay to do so, or at least look up information and see if it's okay to do so. And we will go from there. So once again, if you like the video, like the video. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. I have a lot of things on the channel, and I will have plenty of other things in the future coming. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comments section, and I will respond to them as promptly as I can. And in the next video, we will conclude Sabres of Infinity. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.